Hello and welcome to Green Disruptors. Today I'm joined by Cate O'Kane, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Trees for the Future, an agroforestry nonprofit that's been restoring land and transforming lives across Africa for over 35 years. With their innovative forest garden approach, they empower smallholder farmers to regenerate degraded land, boost food security, and build sustainable livelihoods, while actively combating climate change at the same time. From local seed economies to global carbon markets, Cate shares how this rooted, regenerative model is creating a ripple effect far beyond the fields. Let's get into it.
Hi, Cate. Welcome to Green Disruptors.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, definitely our pleasure. Tell us, first of all, about the organization and how long it's been around.
So I work for an organization called Trees for the Future. We've been around since 1989, so just over 35 years, which seems like an incredibly long time for the work we've been doing, but it's obviously been needed for a while. And we are an agroforestry nonprofit. We work with smallholder farmers across Africa in some of the most challenging circumstances to try and ensure that they are able to restore their land and unlock prosperity. And we do that through something called the forest garden approach, which I'm looking forward to telling you about.
Yes, we will dive into that, but give me maybe a little more detail. Like, has it been the same mission since the beginning? Like, there hasn't really been much change to that.
Well, unfortunately, it has been similar missions since the beginning because, we've needed more trees. We keep on cutting
Same
trees
problem.
down. We've had the same problem for decades. But we have been adapting, we have been pivoting to what has been happening in the world. And so, from the first mission of really planting trees wherever we were in the world, and we were in many more countries at the start when the founders created this, we're now more focused on a farmer-centric approach. So, beyond planting trees, really working with farmers to ensure that they're able to create livelihoods for themselves and that they're becoming resilient to climate change. And I think probably in the last 35 years, we now understand climate change a lot more. Well, most of us do. And we're also looking for solutions that go beyond putting a tree in the ground. What does that mean? What can it do? How do we need to do that consistently? And how do we do it in a sustainable way so that that tree stays in the ground as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that, you've been around since 1989, but the effects of climate change are definitely hitting these underserved communities anyway. So the fact that you already had boots on the ground and
Yeah.
some solutions that you're working on is pretty cool. Yeah, tell us about the forest garden approach.
Sure. So I think it's always interesting because I'm talking to you right now on sort of like a green tech kind of like podcast. And, so we're not really that technological in a lot of ways. I mean, my CEO will probably hate me for saying that, but we work with farmers and we work in their forest gardens. And a forest garden is, if you just imagine a tract of land in Africa, it's about an acre or maybe a hectare big. And it's land that's probably been degraded for the last decade or 2 decades. And that's really a sign of colonialists coming in and saying, hey, grow lots of maize for us. And so those
Yeah.
lands have been monocropped. With monocropping, there have been so many issues, as I'm sure your listeners know about, but that means that the soil has become really degraded. It's not good for growing things in. It means that if they've grown one crop for a season after season, and if that crop fails, it's not really an economically good livelihood for them. And so the forest garden approach is a mixture of forestry and agriculture. And it starts by really trying to restore that land and make sure that farmers can grow what they need, not only to feed themselves, but also to have something left over to take to the local markets. So every forest garden, and I've been lucky enough to visit a few, every forest garden is just a beautiful little oasis in the middle of
Yeah.
these villages. It starts with a living fence, and that's 4,000 trees that are created and put in. So there's 4,000 trees in total in the garden, but you have a living fence. And we do that because, bizarrely, you want to make sure that the hippo from the nearest Lake Victoria is not going to walk across this garden, or the livestock from your neighbor is not going to come in and undo all the great work you've done. So you create a living fence that also, as well, really just gives people a pride in their forest garden. It is theirs to do.
Yeah, they can see the boundary.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then once you're inside the forest garden, we're planting fruit trees. And those fruit trees are generally determined by the gardener, the farmer himself or herself. They decide what they want to grow. They decide, when are they going to grow it. They understand their local marketplaces. So there's so much autonomy and individual kind of like freedom to decide what is right. We obviously give them guidance as to what's going to work well and what's going to grow well. So there's fruit trees, there's timber trees in there. And these may be more long-term investments, especially as we get more into the carbon market, and I can talk more about that. But these trees are really the ones that are going to be there for the long term and start to do the carbon storage for you. We also have in there fodder trees. So a lot of the farmers also have some livestock, and with those fodder trees, again, they're growing them. There's a carbon element to that, but they're also able to lop off some of the lower hanging branches, and that provides fodder for their livestock. And actually in Uganda, we've seen that they're also using that fodder and making it into animal feed as well. So there's another amazing economic business coming out of that. And then interspersed within all of this, we also have the agriculture, the crops. And so they're growing vegetables under the trees and interspersed within that. And those crops are created in a perma-garden that feeds them and their family, but also there's enough left over to take it to the local market, and in some cases, maybe even to a more regional market as well. So you're creating this beautiful oasis within the forest garden that is doing good things to restore the land. It's doing good things to sequester carbon. And then it's also doing good things for the economic stability of that family and their community through increasing food security, dietary diversity, and then putting money into their pockets as well. So it's, I hate to say it, but it feels oftentimes like a magic little silver bullet because there's so many elements to it to make it really worthwhile.
Yeah. So how does the organization decide who to partner with? And are these only existing farmers, or are there people that are maybe just like interested in having a farm, or they just have to have some land?
Yeah, they have to have some land. So we don't work with anyone who doesn't have land, unfortunately. We want to make sure this is something that they have the ability to take forward and keep generation after generation. So we work with existing farming communities, and then we expand into those communities as we get to know them better. And we do it in a way where we make sure that there's absolute clarity as to how they're working with us. We do something that the UN created called the free, prior, and informed consent process. So we go into a community, we start first of all by talking to the leaders of that community. That might be a chief, it might be a local government group. And make sure that they're comfortable with us being there. We're not going to just storm in and suddenly start signing people up to things. We want to do this.
Colonialism.
Right, exactly. So we've learned, some of us have learned, thankfully, and we're moving this forward in a different way. So as part of that, we do this free, prior, and informed consent. And that means that there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of, does this make sense? Do you want to do this? You're not being forced into doing it. It's something that is there as a choice for you. And within that, we also make sure it's not all in English, right? If we're in Kenya, it's in Swahili. If we're in a certain part of Uganda, it's in Law as well. It's in Wolof. When we're in Senegal, we're making sure that this is clear. And then once people get involved, there's a whole sort of like period that they work with us. It's actually a 4-year program. I mean, It's pretty much like a little mini MBA for farmers.
Yeah.
Candidly, having a tiny garden myself, I would love to go and do it because it's really amazing what is learned along the way in terms of regenerative agriculture. And so they work with us for that 4 years. That's helping them know what to plant. It's helping them learn how to compost. If you imagine, many farmers around the world have been told that artificial fertilizers, chemical fertilizers are the way to do things, and that is further degrading the land that they have. So learning how to compost, creating compost piles, knowing what to do with that is a really key lesson for people in terms of how they can succeed. And they also don't have to spend money on a chemical fertilizer. So it's, again, saving money that they maybe don't have already by using what they're getting from the land. And so over 4 years, they learn how to tend their crops. They learn how to restore their land. They even are now starting to learn about how to sell their products in the marketplace. They may be learning as well through some of the other programs we've created, such as a village savings and loans association, how to save money, how to be able to because we're very fortunate. I don't know about you, but I had my first bank account when I was maybe 16, and I put my Saturday.
I was 14.
Yeah, exactly. And you understood the concept of saving. And if you've been living on $1 a day for years and years, savings were just not something you could even think about.
Yeah, because there's no extra money ever.
You're spending it, you're going to the market and you've got food or you need medicine. And so a village savings and loans association is a really big thing because people now have money to save and they're saving it collectively so that they can almost act as a bank manager for somebody else in their group and loan them the money if they need it in an emergency, or someone's kid's going to university and a bit more money is needed to make sure that happens. Things that just were not even needed years ago, and the change that they're getting from their hard work in their forest gardens. So it's really disrupting in a lot of ways what is happening at a community level, because opportunity is there now. And there's a great saying, and I'm sure others on your podcast have used it, that, you know, talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And the forest garden approach is really starting to provide those opportunities to farmers in the countries where we're working.
Yeah. And I mean, the effects of it are, there's benefits on every side for every party. And
Absolutely.
that's amazing.
We're seeing it across many different levels, but I think just also thinking about it from a scale perspective as well, there are 33 million smallholder farmers in Africa at the moment. And so even just to think, if you know, I mean, I'm not suggesting that Trees for the Future is going to work with all 33 million, but this sense of regenerative agriculture, this sense of using farmers really as these agents of change, which they can be, to take it to that scale, to really create that would be system change at a huge level. And there's over 600 million acres of degraded land at the moment in Africa. So if we could get just all of those farmers and all of that land sorted, the way in which that could disrupt things for us as a global community in terms of climate change, in terms of the communities in Africa who would have enough food to feed themselves. And so just reducing poverty. And we've all been hearing a lot about, you know, countries don't want to be providing international aid over to Africa or Asia. Well, that wouldn't be needed. That wouldn't even be a conversation, because what this is doing is really allowing people the dignity and the pride to be able to succeed for themselves. So there's a climate element and there's just an economic livelihoods element. And if we can bring both of those together, then we're all going to do better ultimately from it.
Yeah. I think there's something so deep here in the sense that it's tied to the land that these people come from and that they love. And so giving them further ownership over it and turning it into something more productive and more beautiful, like that cuts deep.
It really does. And, you know, I mean, I've been fortunate, as I say, to visit with these farmers, and you get that sense of pride. You get, you know, they're walking around showing you this papaya tree. They're giving you papaya from it. And boy, does it taste good. I'm not a fan of papaya normally, but it tasted pretty amazing when I was having it in Uganda.
Yeah, fresh off the tree. Yeah, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a story I'll tell you about a wonderful woman I met in Kenya last year, Dorothy, and sadly she has passed since, because life is tough, and people's lives are a lot more fragile and vulnerable than we have over here. But she had been the wife of a Kenyan army officer for a long time, and she was about 60 when I met her, and she had become a farmer with Trees for the Future. And she was growing her land. I think she had about 2 hectares, but she was doing the forest garden on at least 1 hectare of it. And it was going really well, and she was making some money. And then we introduced something called the Seed Bank project, where we encouraged the farmers that we were working with to actually get the seeds off their trees and sell them back to us. Because one of the strange things, again, that we never think about in this country is that there's a scarcity of seeds in Africa. You'd think that they would be everywhere, but they're not being collected. There's no quality assurance to them, so maybe they're not germinating well. So we've created a program, and the farmers can go and they can shake their trees, literally, get the seed pods down, collect them, clean them, and then get them back to us, and we do a quality test on them, and the ones that germinate gives us a percentage, and then we pay them for these seeds. So she's suddenly got a whole new business. And it's doing so well that she's bringing all her neighbors in to do this business with her, and they're bringing their seeds to her. And so she's basically become like the seed guardian of that area. She's not even doing her farming anymore. She's got the kids and her husband doing that, because she's like, the seed business is where I'm going. And I think last year she got about $6,000 out of seeds, which is transformational money when you are living almost at a stage of poverty, sending her kids and her grandkids to university. And when I was there, she had just put up this massive chicken coop, and she had 500 chicks coming in the next couple of days, because she decided she was going to be a chicken farmer now. And she's just one of those people, again, you know, talent is universal, opportunity is not, where you're just like, this was something that was always in her. We didn't
Yep.
create this in a sense. It was
Mm-mm.
there. All we did was give her the opportunity, the tools, and the sense that she could do it, that it came out.
She just had options where she didn't before.
Exactly, exactly. So she's doing great things for the earth. She's doing great things for her family, and actually she's doing great things for herself. And we're talking here about green and about climate, but there's a whole element of gender equity that's coming out of this as well. And just changing sort of like maybe some of the patriarchal norms
Yeah.
that have existed globally in a lot of places.
Yeah. That's just, I love that. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that honed
It's
in
key. Yeah,
personal
it's
story.
kind of moments like that where you just kind of, this is worth it. This is something that is making a difference, not just for this generation, but think of her granddaughters who've seen what their grandmother could achieve, and now they know, what they can do as well.
Yeah, that gives me chills. That's amazing. So, a lot of the times the businesses I work with are for-profit businesses, and they're making impacts. So I haven't talked to too many nonprofits, but the growth factor is different because you're making decisions for different reasons
Yeah.
besides the bottom line. So what does growth look like, and what are the unique challenges you see?
Absolutely. So, growth is the same, I think, in the for-profit world. And I came from the for-profit world before I went into this. And, you want to achieve scale. You want to be able to do more of what you're doing, hopefully for less money, more effectively, quicker, all of those things. I think one of the differences in the nonprofit world is the complexities, and we have to acknowledge the complexities. We don't have the money just to be able to kind of like drive them away. We have to live within them, embrace them, and take them into our projects. One of those complexities is always funding. I mean, do we have enough money to do what we want to do? Do we have enough money even to measure what we're doing? How do we make sure that what we're doing is the most effective and efficient way of doing it? Does it create the impact that we're wanting? Does it making sure that we're not having adverse impact as well? Like, is it the right thing and not doing something else somewhere else? I think the other thing as well is there's maybe in some ways just closer to the communities, and that's not every for-profit businesses need to understand their customer. We need to understand that, of course, but we are sort of really seeing it at the human individual level. And sometimes it can be hard because you want to make sure it works for each individual, and we have to look at it from a more collective space sometimes, to make sure
Yeah.
that what we're doing can get done for as many people as possible. So it's similar, but I think it has just maybe a different lens in which you come into it. And then, ultimately, most nonprofits kind of like want to work themselves out of business, which is not what you're generally doing when you're in a full. You want to keep it going. Like we want to get to a stage where
We've
farmers,
done it.
yeah,
Mission completed.
and climate change is no longer an issue, and no one's living in poverty. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. So there is always work to be done, but it does put a different lens on it again. That
Yeah.
I'm not here to make a profit. I'm here to make an impact, and hopefully that impact is going to be something that, with more of it, means that people like me and organizations like ours no longer need to exist. There is the other side to it as well, because while we are a non-profit, we are also creating some profits in terms of what is happening with people when they take their goods to market, right? So the people
Hmm.
we work with, we want them to make a profit. And so what's interesting to us as a nonprofit is really trying to bring the expertise and the knowledge of the for-profit business into what we're doing. And, that's something where I don't know that there's always enough kind of like cross-meshing of worlds to make that easy. We try to do a social entrepreneurship kind of like approach to our work. We do social marketing where we're trying to make sure people know how to sell their papayas. And so I think one of the things that's always interesting, and this is where I got into this work, is how do the efficiencies, how do the ways in which the for-profit world work, how do we incorporate those into the not-for-profit world so that ultimately we can do it better, we can do it more efficiently, and we can maybe do it quicker as well, so that we can solve some of these problems a little bit more speedily.
Yeah. So what are your funding channels currently?
So we're very lucky. We have about, at the moment, 50% of our revenue comes from businesses, some large ones, a lot of sort of small and medium enterprises as well, who support us as part of their corporate social responsibility,
Hmm.
or just as something that from their climate and their ESG kind of side of things, they
Yeah.
want to ensure they're engaged with, which is great. And then we also have individuals, you know, regular people who have read about us or heard about us. Some incredible people who send us messages saying, "Hey, I'm doing 3 extra shifts this weekend, and I'm going to send you one of my shifts money." And
Wow.
so it's not just rich people; it's people who are just kind of like themselves trying to get by, but they acknowledge what is going on in the world, and they're just the good people who want to make sure they're supporting. We have foundations, some of those very large ones, some of them again smaller family organizations that have set up, and they are supporting us. Oftentimes, they're supporting us in some of the systems that we're creating. So it's not about just planting trees. It's for them. It's really about how do we help you get better at what you're doing,
Yeah.
which is super helpful money, because that's something that it's kind of like our R&D budget, which again, nonprofits generally do not have an R&D budget.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's really helpful as well. Um, and then most recently, we've been engaging in the carbon markets, and this is a new area for us. So working with venture capitalists and with investors, which is a whole new world. But what's exciting about that is that it's allowing us to bring farmers into the global carbon credit market. So imagine you're a farmer in Homa Bay, which is on the coast, on the coastline of Lake Victoria in Kenya. Never before would you have been able to kind of like sell your carbon from the trees that you have grown to make sure that Microsoft or Meta or whoever it is able to get carbon credits out of it, and you get funding from that. So that's an interesting new channel of finance that is coming our way.
Hmm.
It's more of an investment. It's long term. It's needing patient capital in a way. And maybe 3 years ago, I wouldn't even know what patient capital was. So you can see how, again, nonprofits are having to learn a lot more about the for-profit world and the investment world. But what it's doing is it's providing a pathway for different kinds of finance to come into the work that we do.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, and the way I see it, it's like sure there's differences, but at the end of the day, you're still needing to share your message in a way that's meaningful to businesses and individuals um, who would want to participate. So forming those relationships, getting your messaging right, I mean, that's universal.
It is, and I think oftentimes, and again, I've worked on both sides, and I know there can always be a tendency for nonprofits to look at the for-profit world as like the ATM. Just give us money and we'll go and do something.
Yeah.
And I actually think there's so much more that can be done from that perspective, because, a lot of the businesses that I've worked with over time actually have customers, or they have business in Africa where we're working, or they have supply chain issues, or they're trying to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the world. And, if we could all look at the ways in which for-profit and non-profits work together from a more strategic basis versus a
Mhm.
transactional basis,
Yeah.
we'd all be a lot better off. I was very fortunate to work in my last job with a lot of members of the global pharma industry who are, not always appreciated, but they were looking at how to ensure that people had access to medicine. Now that I'm working in sort of the agroforestry and agriculture world, I look at the supply chain. We had a farmer a couple of months ago who had 3,000 avocados that he had from his trees. And these were beautiful avocados. I love avocados. It kind of breaks my heart that what happened next was he couldn't get his avocados anywhere. He didn't have a clear supply chain or value chain to be able to
Mhm.
get it out to the marketplace. So he ended up feeding his avocados to his pigs. Now, very
I know.
lucky pigs,
I was
but
gonna say those pigs were happy, but
right, exactly. But, wouldn't it be great if, we somehow could work together and that supply chain was set up, because instead of money, some companies like, hey, let us help you make sure those avocados get somewhere, or some business wants to buy those avocados, whether it's avocado oil or dehydrated
right,
fruit and things like that. There's so many opportunities to really, I think, have cross-sectional and
to connect
cross
the dots.
exactly. And that's
Hmm.
that is, I think, somewhere where, oftentimes the misses come, and where the non-profit sector could do more to reach out, but also the for-profit sector could look at it in a way of like, well, maybe it's not going to make us business right now, but in 5 years' time, we're going to really know what's going on in that bit of Kenya, and our business there is going to be massive. So
Yeah.
I look to that as an opportunity, from more than just a monetary basis, but really from a partnership and a strategy basis.
I'm starting to say the same things in every episode, but I swear it's a theme. Everything you just described is circular economy to me, and it's systems thinking.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that nothing is ever just one to one.
No. And nothing is
So,
ever sort of like just sectoral. Like the issues that we
yeah,
have as an organization are just the same as, some small company setting up somewhere. And so how do we learn together? How do we adapt together? I think every industry and every business since 2020, at least with COVID, has had to learn how to pivot. The nonprofit sector as
absolutely.
well. And so how do we just find a way where one of us doing better means all of us are doing better? And I think, there's been a lot of language about, well, Africa's over there and, this is over here and things are so different. People are people, and
Yeah,
needs are needs. And people wanting to make sure their family's doing better is no different whether you're in Des Moines or you're in Nairobi. It's the same thing. And so business is doing better, people doing better, we're all going to do better. And so that circularity, but also just that holistic kind of approach.
yes.
Maybe I sound a little Pollyanna about it, but truly having visited so many of these places,
I love Pollyanna.
it's just not. And, trust me, most of my friends think I'm a hard-nosed capitalist because I worked in the private sector. And I'm like, that's fine. Because if doing that means that someone does better, and we can do it in a way that is still aligning to their human rights and is still respectful of who they are, for us, working with farmers is doing that, because these farmers have the land, they have the capacity, they have the passion to do it. All we're doing is giving them the opportunities, and maybe some of the tools and tactics, and then they fly. They really do, and that's what's amazing about it. And they're probably doing a lot more than most other people to save the planet as well in terms of active
Absolutely.
work. So
Yeah.
they kind of, to me, they're kind of like modern day heroes on that kind of front. And I don't come from a farming background. I, used to work in advertising and I was all about my high heels trotting down the road. But this to me, put my wellies on and be in these fields, and you really sort of see climate change happening in front of you, but you also see how they are transforming things to make sure that it's getting a little bit better for all of us, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a brilliant note to end on. Like, slow clap.
Well, thank you. But thank you so much for this opportunity. I mean, it's great to talk to people who are as invested in this, and what you're doing with this podcast and just getting the word out there is really amazing. So thank you for that. Really do.
Yeah, well, I mean, my pleasure. It's selfishly, I just like talking about it, so it's really fun for me. But yeah, just thank you. We're both glad to be here.
We are. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate.
Take care. Bye.
Big thanks to Cate for joining us today. Her stories and insights remind us that the solutions to our most urgent environmental and social challenges don't always require new technology, just deeper roots, better partners, and people the opportunity to thrive. If you're interested in supporting or partnering with Trees for the Future, check out trees.org. And as always, thanks for tuning in to Green Disruptors. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who cares about sustainability, regenerative agriculture, or meaningful impact. This podcast was brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing. Thank you so much.